and thank you for joining the Caneberry Educational Conference as part of the 2021 Southeast Regional Fruit and Vegetable Conference. I am Austin Wren with Wren's Farm and will be the moderator for this presentation. I'd like to thank Wish Farms for sponsoring the 2021 Caneberry Educational Conference. Pesticide CEU and CCA credits are available for most presentations during the live Southeast Regional Conference. Click the Pesticide CEU Guide for a list of approved presentations and participating states. The Pesticide CEU Guide is located in the Event Resources tab under the Media Player. The guide is also available at the Resources Center located on the main menu for the conference. Please note, pesticide credits will only be available for registered attendees and only during the live conference. Credit will not be available for on-demand viewing. There's a simple three-step process to receive pesticide CEU and CCA credits. First, go to the audience chat box located on the left side of your screen and type your first name, last name, and the states for which you are requesting credit. Again, go to the audience chat box located on the left side of your screen and type your first name, last name, and the states for which you are requesting credit. You will need to do this for every presentation to request CEU credit. The second step is to sign out at the end of every presentation. To sign out, go to the audience chat box and type your first name, last name, and the states for which you are requesting credit. You will be reminded to sign out at the end of your presentation. The third step is to complete the pesticide CEU registration. You only have to complete this registration one time during the conference. This is not required for every presentation. To access the pesticide CEU registration web link, open your Pesticide CEU Guide on the Event Resources tab located under the Media Player. The Pesticide CEU registration web link is located in the front cover of your guide. This presentation is pre-recorded to reduce technical difficulties. We will be answering your questions live at the end of this presentation. You can submit a question at any point during this presentation by typing in your question into the questions box and pressing send. Don't forget to thank our 2021 conference sponsors and exhibitors by visiting the virtual trade show and the featured products pavilion. Lastly, don't forget to join us each morning for coffee chats and each evening for networking. Check the conference agenda for details. Now, I'd like to introduce Jonathan Oliver with UGA, who will be presenting Blackberry disease management.
Thank you, Austin. Yes, so I am Jonathan Oliver, the small fruit pathologist and extension specialist at the University of Georgia, based in Tifton. And today I'm happy to speak to you about Blackberry disease management. For my talk today, I'll begin by speaking about some of the diseases that we've seen during this past year on Blackberry, and then I'll move into some specific information about the management of several diseases, including cane blight and cane dieback, rust diseases, orange cane blotch, and leaf spots. And then I'll end by talking about updates to the seasonal spray schedule. First, the 2020 disease diagnostic summary. In 2020, we saw several different disease issues affecting blackberries in Georgia. We saw leaf spots and leaf rusts in particular this year, as well as significant problems with cane blight, the pathogen Leptosphaeria. And that occurred generally because of high rainfall in May and June in Georgia. And we saw a good bit of problems at that time with this disease. So speaking of cane blight and cane dieback is a frequently observed issue affecting blackberry fields in southern Georgia, and individual canes and whole plants eventually decline, collapse, and die. And you can see this plant here where many of the leaves have already fallen off, and the plant will continue for a while trying to put up new primocanes, but these will eventually die in a similar way, and nearby plants will probably die as well. And the leading contributor to this dieback is believed to be cane blight in the southeast. Cane blight is caused by the fungus Leptosphaeria coniotherium, and this fungus produces spores that are spread by rain splash and generally infect canes via wounds. So blackberries have lots of times during the season where they are pruned, and where thorn blackberries through wind and other actions can self-wound other canes, and these are all opportunities for cane blight to infect. Lesions from cane blight appear on primocanes in the summer, fall, and winter, and likely before the next season, those canes will be girdled completely as the lesion continues to expand, and you will not get fruit production on those canes. And the disease can be recognized sometimes by, on the cane surface, you'll see these little black dots, and those are fungal structures from where the spores are produced of the fungus. Management of cane blight really involves a comprehensive strategy of cultural controls and chemical controls. So whenever you can avoid wounding the primocanes, that would be a great step to limit cane blight problems. So instead of waiting for the canes to get much taller than your trellis system, you can pinch those off or tip those in a way that doesn't involve using large loppers or something to leave a large wound there. That will reduce the chances that cane blight can infect through the large wound that's left behind. Removing infected canes and old floricanes after harvest is a very important strategy for disease management. Those floricanes, after the fruit has been harvested off of them, will begin to die naturally. But during that time after the fruit's gone, they harbor a lot of different diseases that have accumulated over the seasons on these blackberry plants. And so I really encourage you, as soon as possible after harvest, as soon as you're able, to go in and remove these floricanes to prevent disease carryover. And that can be really important for cane blight, but also a lot of other pathogens. Anything that can allow the canopy of the plant to dry more quickly can also reduce problems with fungal pathogens, including cane blight. Keeping weeds down within the plant, or not using overhead irrigation and things like that can reduce moisture trapped in the canopy and reduce disease issues. Avoid nutrition and water stress as well, and that can lead for a healthier plant that can hold up a little better and heal over any wounds that it does have and not get infected with cane blight. Chemical controls for cane blight are recommended. We especially recommend application of fungicides after each day of pruning. So Raleigh or Pristine have been shown to help limit cane blight infections if they're applied after pruning by protecting the wound from fungal entry. And whenever possible, though of course it's often not in the southeast where we get lots of rain, it's best to prune when you have not only that day is dry, but multiple days afterward are going to be dry days, so that rain does not wash the spores from cane blight that are present onto these open wounds from the pruning wounds and lets them heal up before rainfall comes. So that's important as well for cane blight. Moving from cane blight to quote cane blight, it's actually, we're calling it cane dieback because it's very similar to cane blight, but we just don't find the same fungal organism causing it here in Georgia sometimes in some locations. And so often we get calls that say, hey, I have cane blight, can you come out and look at my field? And we try and we cannot isolate the fungus or identify any of the fungus present there, L. coniotherium, that's the normal cause of cane blight. So a graduate student of mine has been working over the last couple years to try to characterize other organisms that are capable of causing dieback from wounds in a similar way that the cane blight pathogen can, and he's found several of those. So what he did is he isolated fungal pathogens from plants showing cane dieback, and then he inoculated potted blackberries with these fungal isolates to determine which of these fungal isolates were capable of causing dieback. And out of the 126 isolates that he obtained from his work from multiple counties within southeast Georgia, he actually only found cane blight once. But a lot of other pathogens appeared to be capable, and they're listed here at the bottom, of causing dieback. And so we did a little study after that to look and see if fungicide applications would be effective against any of these cane dieback causing organisms. And what he found is shown here in this table. So these columns, the abbreviations at the top represent the different fungal isolates that were used to inoculate these plants. And on the left, you can see the different fungicides that were applied to these plants. So you can see in each column how much disease was present based on the number that's there. And I went ahead and color-coded that for you. So red means more disease, green means less disease. And we found through this work that switch and pristine and incognito were able to reduce the level of disease after inoculation. So they appear to be effective at reducing dieback when they're applied after pruning. One note, though, incognito is not labeled for Blackberry, though it is apparently effective. And so these trials indicated that switch and pristine applications may be effective chemical controls for cane dieback if used after pruning events. Other controls for cane dieback that are recommended are very similar to those that I already named, and I won't go through them again for cane blight. But again, avoiding wounding of the primocanes wherever possible is likely important as well for cane dieback. Moving on to talk about rust diseases, we see a lot of cane and leaf rust in South Georgia, and that's shown in the picture on the right. But there is another major disease of rust, and they look superficially similar. They're both rust diseases of blackberry, but they actually are quite different in terms of how you need to manage them. And this is due to the fact that the fungal organisms that cause them have different biologies. So orange rust is caused by a couple of different fungal species, and key for this is that they infect the plant systemically. So this means they cause dramatic, as a result of this, they cause dramatic reductions in vegetative growth and fruit production, and you just can't get rid of them by spraying or pruning them out or anything like that. Because even if you prune the plant off to the ground, as you see in this picture in the bottom right, the spindly shoots that come up will show that they're already infected with the orange rust pathogen. And so the new growth will all be the spindly light green growth, and the orange rust will form pustules on the edge of leaves. And it also, one way to identify this rust as opposed to the other rust is that it will distort the leaf margins. Infected floricanes that grow from orange rust infected plants will not produce blossoms. And so there really is no point in keeping around plants that are infected with orange rust. They're not going to recover. So for managing orange rust, you don't want to get it in the first place. You want to ensure your plants are free of orange rust and eradicate orange rust in wild blackberries that may be within a quarter mile of your planting. And once your planting is established, you need to be inspecting plants and scouting when the new canes come up to see if you see any signs of orange rust. And so these, if you do find them, should be promptly removed and destroyed. Chemical controls are not effective for orange rust once the plants are infected. You can't eliminate the infection. The one benefit of applying fungicides for orange rust is to prevent infection of nearby plants. So if you find an infected plant, we recommend that you remove that plant. But if the nearby plants don't appear to be infected, strobel urine and DMI type fungicides are recommended to reduce the chances that they become infected with orange rust. Cane and leaf rust, as opposed to orange rust, shows pustules on both the leaves and the stems, or on the canes. So you don't see pustules on the canes with orange rust. This fungus does not infect the plant systemically like orange rust, and as a result, fungicides generally have more efficacy, and you can reduce or eliminate new infections with this. And the same plant can be saved, I guess, is what I mean. So severe infections still cause significant problems on blackberry, and they can cause premature defoliation, or they can increase winter injury of the plant, because if the leaves fall off early due to heavy rust infestation, the plant's not going to store up enough reserves to make it through the winter and produce fruit the next season. And so it can be a significant pathogen as well. Managing cane and leaf rust in cultural controls include the immediate removal of floricanes after harvest. Again, there's no point in keeping the floricanes around after harvest, and they will just serve as a source of inoculum where disease can spread to your primocanes. Chemical controls can provide satisfactory control for cane and leaf rust, and the strobel urine and DMI type fungicides are recommended to be applied from green tip and prior to bloom, and then later on in the season as you see new infections. So side by side with these two diseases, both are significant diseases. One is systemic and one is not. The orange rust is the bad one, the one that is much more difficult to deal with. It causes a systemic infection. The pustules are slightly different colors. They're a little more lemon yellow in cane and leaf rust, but it's hard to tell them apart by color. But you do get pustules on both the canes and the leaves with cane and leaf rust. The leaf pustules do not distort the leaf margins with cane and leaf rust, but they do in orange rust. Floricane removal after harvest is recommended for management of cane and leaf rust. For orange rust, you need to completely remove and destroy that plant. And sanitation and fungicide sprays generally provide satisfactory control for cane and leaf rust, but not for orange rust. For orange rust, fungicides will only reduce new infections, but the infected plants must be destroyed. Moving on to talk about a pathogen that's very similar to rust in the sense of the symptoms it causes is orange cane blotch. So orange cane blotch looks a lot like rust. You see these felty orange patches that occur on the surface of the cane, but these blotches are actually caused by a parasitic algae. So it's not caused by a fungus at all. And this algae is producing spores on the surface, and these spores can actually swim. They're little zoospores that, like an algae would, they help the pathogen to spread and reproduce under very wet conditions. So the blotches ultimately crack the canes, as you'll see in that middle image, and this may provide an entry point for other pathogens like cane blight or cane dieback causing organisms. And often these blotches can be mistaken for rust. This was kind of a mysterious pathogen when I first started, but some work right before I started with another professor and myself after have figured out that this pathogen has only a single cycle of disease per season. So it only infects canes in June and July, the new primocanes. So even though in the past, most of the spray recommendations have targeted, fall, October, and November sprays, September, October, November sprays for control of this disease, that was based on the fact that the symptoms show up at that time. But by monitoring individual canes over 2 years, we're able to see that all the spots that are present in September and October on the primocanes actually were due to infections, and very little small spots you can see in some of these images in June and July. So all of the infections appear to be occurring in May through July in Georgia. And management practices really should focus on controlling the pathogen at this stage, because that's when it's most susceptible to control. So culturally, anything, again, to reduce water helps you deal with an algal pathogen. Removing the old fluorocanes after harvest seems particularly important, because if you get harvest in June and this pathogen is still sporulating and spreading to primocanes in July, removing those fluorocanes as soon as possible may limit the amount of time that it's able to spread to the primocanes. But also there's some anecdotal evidence suggesting that tying up your primocanes earlier in the season may reduce infections, and that probably keeps them drier and keeps them up away from where the spores can get. Managing through chemical applications usually involves the use of phosphonate fungicides like Prophyte. And what we found through work of one of my graduate students is that Prophyte works best by preventing infections. So it reduces the number of spots, as shown in the leftmost image. When Prophyte is applied, as opposed to control, which was nothing applied, you see far less spots per cane. And so it's dramatically limiting new infections of primocanes. It does also decrease the size of the blotches and how much they can expand, as shown in the rightmost image. So the spot diameter is decreased after applications of Prophyte, but this is a more modest effect of Prophyte. So really the best use of Prophyte would be to prevent initial infections of those primocanes, which means that optimal control should focus on that, and application should start after primocanes emerge and early in the season when the pathogen is sporulating. So this corresponds roughly to the pre-harvest period and the harvest period in most spray guides. And so we recommend starting applications of Prophyte at that time if you had a problem with orange cane blotch, and continuing them every 3 to 4 weeks for up to 6 applications in total, as the label describes. Moving on to leaf spot diseases, we have several different pathogens that can cause leaf spot. So we have Septoria leaf spot, Pseudocercospora leaf spot, and Cercospora leaf spot on Georgia blackberries. And these can lead to significant defoliation of blackberries when conditions are warm and humid, like we often have. Heavily infected plants, since the leaves fall off, generally produce less fruit the next season, and they lack vitality, and they're more susceptible to cold injury. In general, these diseases look fairly similar, and so in the past, it really hasn't been that important to know which one you have, but that's changed a little bit with some information we've found about Pseudocercospora recently, and I'll get to that in a moment. But cultural controls include, again, reducing moisture within the canopy. Anything you can do pruning-wise or anything to increase air circulation can help reduce problems with leaf spot. Removal of dead or damaged canes, again, after harvest, is helpful with these diseases as well. The fungicides that are helpful for leaf spot control include Tilt, Cabrio, Quilt Excel, and Pristine for all the different leaf spots I named, and Abound and Luna Tranquility for Septoria leaf spot only. And this is probably because isolates of Pseudocercospora appear to have resistance to azoxystrobin or Abound. And we're doing some work this year trying to characterize some isolates from Georgia. I hope to have that data for you for this presentation, but you'll have to wait for that till next year because some of the pandemic effects kind of delayed when we could test and screen those isolates this year. But we are looking into that. So if there is fungicide-resistant Pseudocercospora out there, it's important to know that because that would essentially eliminate possibly all of the QOI fungicides from the list of available options for management of Pseudocercospora. So if so, and there is fungicide-resistant Pseudocercospora that is resistant to azoxystrobin and other QOI fungicides, it really limits us to just tilt as being effective for Pseudocercospora. So we're trying to look into that and figure out how widespread that resistance is so we can let you know management options in that case. But at this point, we don't know for sure that fungicide-resistant Pseudocercospora is present in Georgia, though it has been found in some other southeastern states. Now I'd like to close by talking about the seasonal spray schedule. So managing diseases of blackberry involves looking at the entire season. So here in the middle, I have the different developmental steps listed from delayed dormant through after harvest. And below that line, I have the diseases and when they occur, the key diseases of blackberries and when they occur during the season. And if we are trying to control all of those diseases, it will involve spray applications throughout the season. And so I've color-coded those as well. So for example, Rally and Captan are effective against rust and powdery mildew. Applications at these times. So this is just an example of a spray schedule, but I've updated it to reflect the fact that, yes, we do have new recommendations for orange cane blotch. We recommend prophyte applications in the pre-harvest, harvest, and after-harvest period for management of that disease. But also, if you have these other diseases at your location, and many of them are present throughout the Southeast, you'll need to be applying fungicides that are effective for the management of those disease issues. More information about what fungicides are available for and other IPM practices are recommended for caneberries are found in the Caneberry IPM guide. And within that guide, you will see information like this. This is the table from that guide. And across the top, you can see the developmental stages from delayed dormant to after harvest, just like I showed you before, and the different diseases that are important at each of those time periods and the recommended fungicides that can be used for managing those disease issues. There's also a lot of fungicide efficacy information and some great pictures of some of these bacterial diseases available for free through the My IPM app. And I encourage you to download that from the App Store or Google Play. And now I'd be happy to take any questions that you may have. Thank you.